Well, I had the basic idea at the back of my mind for quite some time, and we were shooting the Saint series, and we're coming towards the end of the series. So I decided on an experiment. We wrote one of the Saint stories that had Roger Moore and an American, and we experimented with the idea of the Persuaders. Instead of an American whiz kid from Brooklyn, which it eventually wound up as with Tony Curtis, we tried to text an oil millionaire, and we tried an episode of The Saint, and it worked very, very well. So with that idea in mind, we took the whole idea of the Persuaders to Lou Grade, who was the company that, now Lord Grade, who was the company that that was responsible for The Saint, sold him the idea of an American and Roger Moore and the whole idea of the Persuaders, and he said, go ahead, make it. The only thing we had to do was to find a suitable American to play opposite Roger Moore. Lou set up a deal with ABC Network in America, and we went across for discussions for casting the American role. Our first intention was to try to get Rock Hudson, but we couldn't get him. The next possibility was an actor whom you probably know called Glenn Ford, who was to play the American, and he wasn't available. So we had a meeting with the networks, and we sat down, and I said to them, look, you give me a list of American actors you would like in the show, and I'll see who we can get. And they went through a list of some actors, and someone mentioned Tony Curtis. I said, well, fine, let's see whether we can get Curtis. Lou spoke to Curtis's agent. Curtis was interested. We went to Los Angeles. The original discussions were in New York. We went to Los Angeles. We met with Curtis. We sold him the idea, and he agreed to do it. So that's how we got Tony Curtis and Roger Moore. It altered the format slightly. Instead of a Texan or millionaire, we had a New York street kid who had become a very rich man, and that's basically how the series started. So we did a trial run firstly in The Saint, and it worked, and we went ahead and we made the show. We knew the show was going to be expensive because television never used two stars like Roger Moore and Tony Curtis before. Tony Curtis had never made a television show before. He was a feature player. Roger had made a great success with The Saint. So we knew it was going to be expensive, and we decided that we will go for broke. We will really make a very glossy, expensive, we had expensive actors, we'll make an expensive looking show, and it worked very well. The show was highly successful. Let's see, we started filming in the south of France in May 1970, I think it was, and we stayed in France for about 6 to 8 weeks, and we shot the backgrounds or some scenes from about 6 different episodes. We then went back to London, and we did the studio interiors, so that we linked up all the 6 episodes that we shot in the south of France with the interiors in London. We also shot for a couple of days in Paris as well for one of the episodes. The rest of them was all shot in the United Kingdom, but we used studio sets for foreign locations. We would send second units out to different countries to get the background material with doubles and cars and so on and so forth. It was, in television terms, a fairly expensive and very glossy series. You start off with two very, very experienced actors, and they had an immediate rapport with each other. We encouraged them to ad-lib. In other words, we had the script written, but we said, use your own words. And we wanted to encourage spontaneity in the show, to make it look as if the actors were thinking the things up as they were going along, and they were, in fact. As long as they kept within the framework of the story, every take was slightly different. The big problem was, if we have 2 or 3 takes on the scene, each take was different. So we had to, so what we invariably used to do was we would shoot a close-up or something and pick the best of each scene and meld them together, and that's how the show worked. It was very much a hit-and-miss idea, but the fact that we had 2 such good artists made the thing work thoroughly. It came at a particularly, the 60s was a marvellous time in Europe. In fact, throughout the world, it was a whole new era was opening up, and the show reflected the carefree atmosphere of that particular period very, very well indeed. Yes, there were pretty girls in it, there was expensive cars, there was expensive sets, and it was a period of I suppose, affluence. After the dim years of the war and the immediate following up of the war, the 60s changed everything. With the Beatles in 1962 or whatever, the whole thing changed for the next 10 years, and we kind of cashed in on that particular mode of living. Oh, as I said, they're 2 very experienced actors. They're professionals. They got on very well indeed. They would try to outdo each other on the set, which worked fine for the show. It had a sort of a competition between them all the time, and I think that came over in the finished result. We made, I think it was 24 episodes. It took us just about a year to film, yeah. We estimated 2 weeks per episode. Normal episodes were about 10 days then, but we took the liberty of spending a little more time on the show, and just to give it the kind of quality we needed. Well, we were thinking of doing another series of The Persuaders when Roger Moore was offered the James Bond part. And obviously, one wouldn't stand in his way to play James Bond, which was going to be an ongoing thing. So with Roger gone, we decided not to do any more shows. There was talk about replacing Roger with someone else, but then we thought about it, and we felt, no, we've done 24, we're happy with them, let's forget it, let's leave it at that. When we started the show, we just certainly had no idea it was going to be a cult show, which has developed over the years. Our main market was to make a success in America. But unfortunately, when the show was first made, the first country to show The Persuaders was Australia. And it was a big, big hit in Australia. And usually, Australia and America usually tend to agree with their television. But when we opened the show in America, it never quite got off the ground. I think the real problem was that the show was ahead of its time. It was tongue-in-cheek, parody of action adventure, not serious. And the Americans are not used to this kind of show. Their drama series was drama and was all done very, very seriously, and the villains were villainous and the heroes were heroic. But our heroes were bumbling, they were inexperienced, supposedly, and they would somehow or other manage to get through their adventures unscathed and to a happy conclusion, which was not accepted in America. They felt that it was, they couldn't make up their mind whether it was drama or comedy. It was a particular type of what we call British humour, which kind of sends things up. The Americans take their things very seriously. Many years later, that kind of show has caught on in America with shows like Moonlighting, which again sent itself up as a detective series. So I think our problem was we were just ahead of our time by about 15 years. But there you are, that's showbiz. You can never be sure what's going to happen. The great George Bernard Shaw once said that Britain and America are divided by the same language, and this is very true because although we speak the same language and we have a culture very, very similar, there's a great deal of difference between the British and the Americans. And this is what we based our comedy on. The British attitude towards one thing and the American attitude. And although they're both trying to get there in their own particular way, their methods of doing things are totally different. So we base our comedy on the British-American misconceptions that exist between the two nations. So that was the basis of the comedy. The basic idea of the title was to explain the backgrounds of our two characters even before they appeared on the screen. Rather than go into lengthy scenes which would develop their character and their upbringing and so forth, we decided to somehow compact this into a title. So you had shots of Tony Curtis as a young man and a boy, and Roger, the shot of Roger as a boy was in fact the shot of his son. We followed their progress by the titles until we actually, by the time we met the characters, we knew about them. That was the whole point of the titles. And John Barrett's music was quite unique. It was a different sort of sound. It had a different kind of quality to it that worked very, very well. It had a kind of a, I don't know, it almost had a Russian feel to the music that seemed to work. John Barrett is a very, very clever man as far as music is concerned, and we wanted something quite different to the normal theme music of a television show, and he came up with that, and of course it was delightful.